Association of British Columbia.
When it comes to buying carpets for your new home, you must visit Dream Carpets. Years of experience selling to contractors has made Dream Carpets the leader in new home installations. Their warehouse is full of the finest carpets from the best manufacturers, like the famous Burlington line, all at guaranteed lowest prices and guaranteed installation too. Hundreds of satisfied customers agree. Dream Carpets are the new home professionals. Dream Carpets, 815 Terminal Avenue, where builders buy.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. As far as I am concerned, purely a personal opinion, the carefully staged and televised occupation of Premier Bennett's Vancouver office on Friday was a farce. But it was a farce which must have given great aid and comfort to Mr. Bennett, watching this extreme left-wing group split away presumably from Solidarity, ushering the press in, being very tough and all the rest of it. My goodness gracious me, they were in control. They knew how to deal with reporters and politicians.
10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please, now, come on, you're going to get me in trouble with everyone else. Okay, just show me the way out. Okay, you okay up there now?
Okay. Hold on. Hold it. Okay. Only BCTV, or only CBC, and the other guys...
Quick. Move it.
Okay, come in, Wayne.
Come on, guys.
Let's go.
You guys the door. Shut the door.
One these out.
Shut the door. They don't want to go. Shut the door.
You don't want them out?
He's stalling around.
I'd like you to go out, please, okay? You've had enough time in here? We just have to keep some order.
Rotate people through.
Yeah.
We'll stay for the whole thing. If,
No, we'd like you to go now.
Stay here for the entire...
And the curtain was drawn on this episode of the People's Government Show.
These are the tough guys, led by Jim Green Gandhi of Dara, whose wages, I think, are partly paid by a grant from the city of Vancouver. And they had a nice, pleasant, well-publicized overnight occupation. But, oh, they were so gentle and so motherly and so nice. After all they'd done was seize a government office, hadn't interfered apparently with the files, and then they brought in the domestics to clean up the place so that nobody would think they were being nasty. Nice little brush, little spit on the leather chair, occupied by Pat Kinsella. Oh, how considerate of them, and picking up every little crumb. All looks very nice, but the damage they did to Operation Solidarity is quite incredible. I wonder how Davy Barrett really feels about this kind of action. I wonder how Jack Monroe and Art Kuby really feel about this kind of action, because this is the very thing which gives aid and comfort to their enemies. And you watch Bennett use it, as so he should. This is not Poland. This is a civilized society. We don't need this kind of orangutan TV-staged occupation. To me, quite brutally, it indicates that Solidarity is not under control. I sincerely trust that Kuby, Monroe and company get back under control, or they will create a climate in this province which will lead, said Webster, quite coldly, to violence. Solidarity is a very tenuous organization anyway, with the Kmart unions, the Dara people, the extreme left-wingers, trying to cause all the trouble they can, not, I suggest, for social credit, but for the BC Federation of Labour, because the maxim of some of these people who organized this nice Nelly occupation is to make things better, make things worse before they get better with their type of dictatorial, non-democratic control. That's what I think about it. Anyway, we'll watch solidarity as it proceeds to blow apart. Today, however, I've got a somewhat embarrassing matter to do. 4 years ago, I conducted a campaign against the restoration of our magnificent old courthouse into a refuge for those who wanted a new art gallery. Just see what I said on November the 7th, 1979. Let me make myself perfectly plain. I am highly suspicious of the cost and the intent and the design and the plans of the Vancouver Art Gallery Association to take their gallery to the old courthouse. This is the magnificent old courthouse, which, even though the Art Gallery have backed down on many of their plans after our program, this is the magnificent old courthouse that they want to move their art gallery into. And that's a magnificent old door with a magnificent front steps in front of it, which may never be opened again except on the most formal occasions. Once they've finished, if they get all the money together, the reconstruction of the art gallery, the entrance will be on the other side, looking across to our magnificent Robson Square development. See that? That's the door. It'll never be opened again. That was 4 years ago. By coincidence this morning, or perhaps I should say by very crafty design, we have in the studio Alex Colville, who is Canada's best-known painter and one of the priciest. And while he's not involved in the gallery, he's going to give us a well-needed dose of art appreciation. And too, for what's going on in the world, we've got Joan Wallace, the Commissioner of the Part-Time Inquiry. Now, full-time inquiry into part-time work. But first, before we start the program, let's take a look at the old Rattenbury building of 1912, which has been gutted and rebuilt. Just about 4 years ago, I was involved in a pretty miserable and verbally violent campaign against those who wanted to wreck our old courthouse. And I think that every judge of sentiment, many lawyers, all old-time reporters, and many members of the public thought it was a damned scandal that the old courthouse was to be ripped apart and completely phonied up for some art gallery which wanted to move down from up the street. And I remember fighting about what I thought then were stupid federal grants, you know, overblown generosity from the provincial government and all the rest of it, because I knew what they were going to do. Move the courts into the new antiseptic Robson Square complex and tear our old courthouse apart. Well, here I am. Won't be long till opening of the new Vancouver Art Gallery in our old, wonderful, dignified courthouse. And I want to find out if they've really screwed it up, or whether I, who am very seldom wrong, have egg artistically done on my chubby little cheeks. So here I am. I'm in fact in the new entrance off, what's his name? Robson Street, into the art gallery, and I'm going to beard this man Luc Rombout in his den and demand to know and see every single thing that has been done in the name of the taxpayers and the name of the art, and I'll give you a yes or no as to whether or not it has been well done. And here is this dreadful man, Luc Rombout.
Glad to have you.
Are you just about finished?
We are. We are ready to open.
Have you ruined the place?
We have done the opposite. We've built a magnificent building here for the citizens of the city and of the province.
And you can guarantee that?
Well, come and have a look.
And how much money have you spent more than you should have done?
Not a penny.
I don't believe you.
We're on budget and on time.
Not a dime more?
No, we didn't.
You kept my marble staircase.
Well, it's not the same staircase. We reversed it. But to tell you, we saved all the marble from the old building, off the walls and so on. We had it recut and repolished. So everywhere you see marble in this building, it's been saved and brought back to...
And you've turned it round.
That's right. Well, you remember we said we wanted another entrance in this building, and we tried to explain at the time why we needed it.
You did that all right, but of course here we go right now to this door.
Yes.
Oh, you've improved the view.
We've improved the view, and we kept our promise. We said that you can use this door for ceremonial occasions, and here it is.
Certainly you've made the view through these doors look an awful lot better.
Yes.
But are you going to keep that fountain? Does that fountain, built by a government, fit in with this great new concept of the Vancouver Art Gallery?
Well, it's fine with me, Jack. It's been there for a number of years. As you know, a lot of people love it. That has been a low priority for me to think about. You know, the key thing here was that we wanted a building which we can accommodate art, and that we have.
Okay, now what about
It looks fine as far as I'm concerned, for the time being.
Nice glass doors. What
Yes.
happened to the huge, big, solid oak
my
brass
God.
lined doors?
I wish we had saved it, because that is just a figment of your and others' imagination.
What are you talking about,
come on.
figment of my
That was an
imagination?
old, decrepit door. It was just, you know, when you listen to people, they think that this door was carved for the Vatican or something. You
Yeah,
know. Well, it wasn't. It was god-awful.
It was,
okay?
just, it was just a crummy old door.
That's all it was.
And you
But
broke
as I
it
said,
up and took it home for firewood,
That's
didn't
right.
you?
Just about.
Just about.
And anyway, as you can see,
We are
we've
now
greatly improved it.
Okay, but we're now on the main entrance. What was the old main entrance of the courthouse, where all the people used to come in and talk to the little information guy over there?
That's right. You mean what happened to the space?
No. I'm just trying to get my location.
Oh, right.
And I know where I am now.
Yes. Well, Jack, first of all, you know more about this building than I do because you spend a lot of time here.
Not true.
What we have done here is basically we've taken out just about all the rooms except the rotunda because we felt that was really...
What do you mean? The rotunda's still in?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's go to the rotunda.
Okay.
Never believe an art gallery director unless he shows it.
The rotunda.
How do we get to the rotunda?
We're walking toward it.
Well, here we are on the rotunda. You've kept your word after all.
We have. And as I mentioned to you, we felt that the rotunda is probably the most important architectural feature in this building.
Same railings?
Same railings, same floor,
Same
all the
tiles?
details. In fact,
Same little balconies?
well, not the way we took it over, because you remember, Jack, that those balconies were all blocked off with cement blocks. They had built offices behind there or something. We took those out. So, as I said, we brought it back to its original condition.
You know, I hate to bring back memories, but I remember one day, 25 or 30 years ago, going into the Court of Appeal down there, and there was a deaf mute, true story, asking for legal aid
Right.
on his appeal. Guess what? 30 years ago, he was refused legal aid. How times have changed.
That is 30 years ago. Right.
And then over there, just behind that new fancy escalator, which takes you up to the top, was the biggest size court.
Right. Right.
And we all used to hang around here in droves, you know, the same old people, same cops, the same reporters, the same judges, the same lawyers, the same hangers-on, waiting for that moment when the jury came scuttling out, and we all ran in, you know, through the main doors, which are now gone, and we'd hear the judge say, "And you shall be taken henceforth to Ocala, where you shall be placed in a cell until January the 15th at 12:01 a.m., black cap, and taken thence and hanged by the neck until you are dead." Listen, you're going to have some ghosts around here.
Well, I doubt it. I really do, because I think from here on in, this building is going to be
A new vibrancy.
beautiful, happy,
Okay.
interesting.
Now, I've asked you to bring me up here, Luke, for a specific reason, because that floor was never there before.
That's right.
So what am I doing now if I go like this?
Well, in your mind, you will remember that was the size cord on the third floor. And as you know, in other areas, we've taken floors out. Here we put a floor in. So this used to be the balcony right behind us,
And down
looking
there
down.
on the
Okay?
accused.
But that explains the ceiling, because of course this was a ceiling that which we retained.
That's the original ceiling from
That's
the
right.
old assize court.
That's correct.
How come you managed to retain that? I thought that would have gone
I wanted to retain it. Had I come 10 minutes later, when they were taking parts of the building down and so on, I walked in here one day, and they were just about to take the whole ceiling down. And I said, hold on a moment, because we can use this ceiling. And not only can we use it, but another objective we had throughout the building is that there like pieces of marble, that there were little things here and there throughout the building that would remind you of what this building used to be. And this is one part that you're looking at now.
Now, we haven't seen your rooms yet, but
No,
what
no,
will you
right.
show in this
Prints and
little-
drawings, because this is a low ceiling, so what we would be hanging here would be smaller works like prints and drawings, photography, and so on.
This has got to be called the roof room.
The roof room.
Hey, I can almost touch it myself. If I were a Toyota dealer, I could. Now we're going to go and learn more about your plans for the gallery and where you're going to show the big stuff. Well, I must compliment you on keeping your promise, because the only way to get down to this level before was those grubby stairs
That's
from the
right.
front door to the
Correct.
government agent's office.
Sure.
And we're going downstairs now where?
Well, we're going back to the forecourt, and to the left and right of the forecourt we have two huge galleries there. One is the Emily Carr Gallery, and the other one is also a gallery for the permanent collection.
Now look, you're taking me into one of the permanent collection galleries, and I
That's
want,
correct.
for a neophyte like me, first of all, you got to tell me why all the different colors.
Well, in this case, it's simply an installation device. On this floor, we will, and in this room, we will be having the 27 old masters from the National Gallery, which we're bringing to Vancouver especially for the opening. And what we've done is each color represents a period or a country where these works come from. So these blue walls here, we will have the Italian works, the red ones, English school. The green will be the Dutch school of painting, and the black one will be the French school.
And by a permanent collection, you don't mean permanently here, you mean great works of art brought
No.
in to be shown in
No,
the
with permanent, I mean permanent. But for this occasion only, because it's a special collection, we had to take this room and give it over to the National Gallery collection.
I know what answer you give me. Have we got a valuable collection in Vancouver?
Yes, we have a collection in excess of $20 million worth of art here, about 3,500 works, representing a whole range of work from 17th century Dutch to contemporary Canadian.
Have we passed the sculpture gallery yet?
No, we haven't. Yet to come.
Yeah, because I want to know what you're going to do with Jimmy Coots, wee Jimmy.
Wee Jimmy.
Is wee Jimmy?
Well, he will have a place in this gallery. I'm not sure that we can put him in the sculpture court that I'm going to show you later on.
Haven't you kept a grubby little place in the basement for him? Meanwhile,
Not here.
let's go and look
Took him out of there.
let's go and look at the Emily Carr collection in one of your other
Be
big
delighted.
galleries. Now, is this a big gallery by definition?
No, it isn't. It's a medium-sized gallery in Canadian terms.
How many feet of exhibition space?
48,000.
But all your stuff is permanent. I mean, you can't
Well, it's
juggle
not-
this around.
Not that permanent, Jack. Here, you want to move this wall? We can move it anywhere we want.
Just a minute, just a minute.
So what do you want?
Back a little bit. So you can rearrange it for whatever you
That's
happen
the
to have.
objective behind all of this, we have a
Okay.
movable walls.
Every school child in British Columbia and most new Canadians know about Emily Carr, don't
Yes,
they?
they sure do. And we have the leading collection in Canada. And we made a commitment to give her permanent space in this gallery. And as you can see, we've set aside this gallery with special covers on the walls
So
and
this
so
one
on.
we're in will always,
Always
be
be Emily Carr.
You might put it away now and again.
No, what we will do is there's only a percentage point of the works are up. So we will
Change them.
Change them, correct.
Dare I ask a piece of sacrilege? Are all Emily Carr's masterpieces?
No, they're not. I don't think that you could say this of any painter. So no, they're not.
But they're valuable.
They're very valuable, and we have the best work up. I mean, there's no question about that.
Now, okay, back to practical. You seem to have done a pretty good job.
Don't be too generous, Joe.
What about money? You started out with 14 million, it cost you 20.
That's right, because I mentioned earlier we have a balanced budget for two reasons. First of all, because we more than doubled the objective, the fundraising objective out of the private sector, where we had to go out and raise 2.6, and we raised 5.2.
And then you had a lucky break in selling
well, we
that
had,
old building
but over and
on
above that.
Georgia Street.
But over and above, that's true. We sold that site. We're going to net out of this whole project. I don't know what it is you want to hear, but we will have a surplus of in excess of $8 million when everything is done. We're setting it up in two endowments, one for the city, which they will invest and use to pick up the extra operating expenses on this side. And we will have an endowment with which we will purchase work, with the income of which we will purchase works of art.
I didn't believe a word you told me 3 or 4 years ago when you said you would do it on a contract price, did you?
Mm-hmm. And we did. Because, you see, what happened
You're
was...
ruining my faith
Well,
in long hairs.
I hope so. I hope, well, look at it.
No, but you know what I mean.
I know what you
the
mean.
culture said.
We couldn't prove you wrong at the time, but we knew that we were doing the right thing and that we could bring it in on budget, and we have.
When's opening day?
October 15th.
Everybody's coming.
Everybody's coming. Governor General, the Premier, the Mayor, everybody we have.
Can I get in free on my pharmacare card?
On Saturday and Sunday and on Wednesdays.
Wednesday is always free for the general public.
That's correct.
When for old age pensioners?
Same thing.
And how much for the public?
The public pays $2. Old age pensioners pay $1, and students, I believe, the same. $1.
Except on Wednesdays.
Except on Wednesdays.
When it's going to be open.
That's correct.
Listen, I've got to find something to complain about. Why are some of these floors shiny and some of them have got carpets?
Well, because we wanted, as an individual walks through the building, that there are sort of these visual surprises in terms of, as I mentioned to you earlier, features in the architecture or in the floor covering itself. So we wanted something different on each floor.
Well, why aren't you opening with Tutankhamun's exhibit? Just why not?
Well, because...
That's the only question I can think of which might stump you at the
Why don't you
moment.
think of something positive?
Well, look, I've had, you know, a little tour. I think I understand it. You've got a neo-classical art gallery. You've maintained much of the dignity and color of the old courthouse, as a matter of fact. How you've done it, I don't know. And we're actually standing just up from the main entrance, we're not, which is down there.
Right? And these steps lead to the sculpture court, which is what we're on now, and to the restaurant.
To the restaurant,
and the
which is over
restaurant
there.
connects the two buildings, you know, the annex and the main building.
And then what do you have in the annex? We won't go into it, but tell me what you have in the annex.
Well, mostly on the main floor, we have a children's gallery there, which you haven't seen, but there's a children's gallery there, orientation space, art rental program, and on the other floors we have a library and the administrative services of the gallery.
As a matter of fact, you're using one of the old courtrooms, which is reasonably untouched as your boardroom.
That's correct.
And the noise in there on the old windows is quite intolerable.
That's right.
Well, you were going to ask me a question.
Well, I'll ask you. You know, because been 4 years, you and I have discussed the pros and cons of this, and now I'm asking you, what do you think of the project?
I'm a little unhappy.
And what are you unhappy about?
It's much better than I thought it would be. As a matter of fact, it looks, in conjunction with the drama of Robson Square over here,
yes,
looks like a great addition to the heart of downtown Vancouver. And you and your volunteers,
yes,
and your money raisers, and your little bit of real estate speculation on Georgia Street
we were lucky.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
October the 15th.
October 15th.
You might have 20,000 people here.
I hope so.
Much obliged to Luke Rombaugh.
My pleasure, Jack.
By happy coincidence, in the studio with me this morning is Alex Colville, Canada's most distinguished, I think, and best known, one of the priciest painters. Alex, you, I find, from my ubiquitous reading of your book very quickly, designed the money in 1967.
Yes, I did it in 65, in fact, but it was the 67 money.
And the one on the back of a 1 cent is what?
Pigeon.
Why a pigeon?
Well, because a pigeon, I was sitting in a restaurant in Toronto and I looked out on the street and there were pigeons on the sidewalk, and I thought, you know, I should have a city creature too.
Good for you. Well, now, before we turn to the high realism, which I'm told is the proper way to describe Alex Colville's words, I want to, again, in this cultural morning, to take a quiet look at a montage of Alex's work. Mr. Colville, I can understand the realism of the war pictures. Did you start out really in serious painting as a war artist for the Canadians?
Yes, I had been a fine art student for 4 years. Then I went in the army like everybody else, and I was a soldier for 2 years. And then suddenly I made a war artist. And I was a war artist then for 2 full years.
Was that which gave you this concentration on high, if I'm correct, high realism?
Well, I don't know. It was certainly a great start for me. You know, it was like having a Guggenheim Fellowship or something, in the sense that I was actually being paid to do what I wanted to do.
Do I find something kind of depressing, a little bit fearful about the man with his looking out the window with the pistol, the semi-automatic on the table behind his back? Perhaps you at one time were contemplating suicide.
No, I haven't. That, interestingly enough, that was painted in California about 6 months, 5 months before Robert Kennedy was shot there.
And you have this preoccupation, as I flip through your book, fair amount of guns and the thing.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I rather like guns, and of course, guns are a very prominent feature in the late mid-20th century. You know, I mean, I suppose there are more handguns per capita in the world now than at any other time in history.
Mm-hmm. Now, a man like yourself, who got your start as a water artist because of your particular talents, obviously, how do you suddenly find you grow and become a fantastic international success? I mean, how does that process happen?
Well, it happens in a very unspectacular way. It's not like showbiz or you know, the music world. I mean, and after all, an artist is never a success in the sense that, say, a rock singer is. You know, I mean, it's important to bear in mind that I would guess something like 2, 3, 4% of the population actually go to art galleries. So that I am a relatively obscure person, really.
Not at $100,000 a painting when you don't even have to flog them on the market, Alex.
Yes, the pay is quite good, but what I'm saying is that I am really not a famous person, and I'm rather glad that I'm not.
In other words, you're famous only in certain circles, and that it is your work rather than you.
That's right, yes.
Which
yeah.
attracts the attention.
Yeah, I live in a very remote place, and I do this because of course I like living there, but also I'm out of the kind of limelight there.
And inspiration is not something of which you're short. You've been married to the same woman, I must recall,
Yes.
that for how many years?
41 years.
And
yeah.
is she your model in many
Yes,
of the pictures?
Yes. Yeah.
But why? Where do you live?
I live in a place called Wolfville, which is about an hour's drive from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia. And,
Yeah.
and I understand from Maclean's magazine that you are the only Mercedes-Benz in the village.
No, in fact, I think there are about 5 of them there, but I have perhaps the nicest one.
Therefore, you're what's the word, retrousse. You're a shy person.
I suppose so, perhaps.
Or
yeah.
just supremely confident. You do your paintings, and then how do you dispose of them? Do you put on international exhibits?
Well, no, my dealer for years now, 15 or 16 years, has been Fisher's in London, in England, with whom I have a very pleasant relationship. I think pleasant for them, pleasant for me. And when I finish a painting, I send it to them. I take it to the Halifax airport, and it's in London the next morning. No longer my problem.
Well, now, if and when you eventually go, as all we must, of course, there will be a great collection of Colville memorabilia and drafts and sketches which will be sought by every gallery in the world.
Well, I don't know about that. Sometimes when people die, their reputation goes right down.
Is there any other painter like you? The high realism now I can understand, because I can understand most of your paintings.
Yes.
And they're visible and they're legible, and
yeah.
there's nothing abstract about them.
No, I think they are popular in a certain sense.
Does this make you unusual in that there is a
Yes.
message in your paintings, but there's no abstract message?
Yes, it does make me. I think the fact that my paintings are relatively popular, that is with people who do look at paintings, is an unusual thing. Mm-hmm. And of course something that I rather like. I mean, I'm glad that that is so.
Can you explain to me the horse and the train?
Well,
which is very dramatic, this powerful horse galloping up between the ties.
It's about the idea that you know, the horse is being what he is regardless of what happens, sort of thing. That's the way I think of it.
And that's the way you think of life.
Yes, I do.
But it was your
basically.
war experience which gave you the
Yes,
focus.
to some extent. I think the war experience did kind of bring things together for me.
When is your exhibit in Vancouver?
Next June, early June, it opens.
Next June. First book?
This isn't the first book on my work, but I think it's the best, partly because it's the most recent and contains, you know, a high proportion of, in fact, of my life's work.
Who wrote it?
A man named David Burnett, who also organized this big retrospective, who is a protege of the famous guy at the Courthouse Institute, who also, it's not worked for the KGB.
Also which?
Worked for the KGB.
What do you mean he worked for the KGB?
Yes, well, he was he was the Queen's keeper of the paintings and so on. He's dead now.
Oh, you don't mean the KGB. Oh, you mean Sir Anthony Blunt.
Yeah, Blunt, Burnett was a pupil of Blunt. Blunt was a very brilliant man, you know, in his field.
Art, therefore, of course, we know, covers all political aspects which don't really matter in relation to art. Is that correct?
That's right.
Mr. Colville, we won't see you in Vancouver. You don't have an exhibit coming right now to our
No,
art
not till
gallery.
next June.
Next June you'll be there.
I'm going to Berlin next month.
Berlin next month to do an exhibition?
Yeah, this same exhibition goes from Toronto to Berlin.
Toronto to Berlin, and then we will get it next June.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful you came in here this morning, Mr. Alex Colville. I now know what the retrospective is, and I agree with you in high realism.
Thank
My
you.
thanks
My
to
pleasure.
Alex Colville. The book is be a bagatelle, $25 if you're a Colville fan. It's cheaper than $100,000 for a painting not yet done. Correct?
That's right.
Next, Joan Wallace, Commissioner on Part-Time Employment. I have here a summary of the major recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry into Part-Time Work. And they want the UIC regulations changed to allow part-time workers who do more than 8 hours a week to collect money from that near-bankrupt fund. And they want to do away with mandatory retirement so as to enable older workers to work part-time if they choose and do younger workers unemployed out of any possibility of a job. Now that's where we'll start. In the time of this major recession with God knows how many million people unemployed, along comes Joan Wallace's Commission of Inquiry into Part-Time Work, and I'm sure she can make sense of these two particular... Oh, and you also want pension and fringe benefits for all part-time workers as well as full-time workers. You want to increase the number of bureaucrats in the country by 100 million. Explain yourself, Joan Wallace, Commissioner of Inquiry into Part-Time Work.
Okay, first of all, we don't want to increase the number of bureaucrats, but we do want to ensure that part-time workers are treated fairly compared to full-time workers. And the view that you've expressed is typical, first of all, of employers, and secondly, of a lot of unions. And that is that part-time workers don't really need their pay. They're only working for pin money, and you know, they should be laid off first. They don't need to have any of these benefits. And we found in our research this is simply not true.
You're saying that both employers and unions take that somewhat reactionary view, which you believe to be reactionary, which I expressed.
Yes, we found that part-timers were discriminated against not only by employers, but by their unions, by governments, and by full-time workers, who tend to treat them as not being serious about their jobs and resenting the fact that they're not working full-time.
And of course you want equal pay for work of equal value.
Yes.
Well, is that not on the cards right now, federally speaking?
It's on the books in Canada for anyone working under federal jurisdiction, and also in Quebec. But most provinces have equal pay for equal work.
Well, tell me some of the more gruesome facts which you must have ascertained during your lengthy and expensive inquiry.
It wasn't lengthy. It was only 1 year, and it wasn't expensive either, Jack. And we came in
only 1 million?
No, 400,000.
400,000.
And we came in on budget.
I see. What were the things that made your hair stand on end about part-time workers?
Well, I think the just overall pervasive view of part-time workers as not needing their money, I think, was what we found the worst. For example, we found that employers pay them less than they pay full-time workers for doing exactly the same work. They don't include them in pension plans or fringe benefit plans. They don't include them in training programs. They don't give them opportunities for promotion. Then we found that unions, with certain exceptions, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but most of the unions tended to want part-timers to be laid off first, if there were any layoffs coming, no matter how many years they'd been there.
Oh, I can see that right away. That's only fair, isn't it?
Oh, very reactionary view you have, Jack. We also found that unions often insisted on a separate seniority list for full-time and part-time workers, so that the part-timers lost out on various benefits, and also were again the first to be laid off.
But how could you have a how could you have a melded seniority system where there are people who work full-time and people who work part-time? If you're going to lay off a full-time worker because you want to lay off a full-time worker, how can you have to lay off 2 part-time workers?
You might have to, but what's being done we found there are 4 industries where part-time workers are treated fairly, and that's in nursing, teaching, retail clerks in supermarkets, and those are the unionized retail clerks.
Right.
And the other group are hospital workers, members of QP and the Hospital Employees Union. And those were the only groups that we found where part-time workers were being treated fairly.
In other words, if you're a nurse, a registered nurse that is,
Yes.
or a teacher, or a retail clerk in a union, or QP, you got your proportionate fringe benefits.
Now, I should say that not all of them. Those are the 4 unions that are working for better benefits. They haven't won better benefits for all of their employees in every case, but at least they're trying.
One, in these days of economic stress and tribulation, one certainly has sympathy for part-timers who might work steadily all year and never collect a nickel of UIC. Do they make contributions of the work? What is the limit?
15 hours a week is the limit now.
And that's the minimum. If you work
yes.
less than 15, you get no UIC.
That's right. And the difficulty is that a lot of part-time workers are on call, and they might work, say, 12 hours one week, they might work 20 hours the next week, 14 hours and 16 hours, so that some weeks they're above 15, some weeks they're below.
And they never qualify.
And, well, the weeks that they work more than 15, they qualify for UIC, but the weeks that they're below 15, they don't.
They would, of course, qualify for reduced benefits depending on their wage rates and their hours of work.
Oh, yes. And what we're saying is that anyone who works more than 8 hours a week should be able to contribute. And we even make a suggestion that will make it easier for the employer to make the deductions. And that is that it would be done on a straight percentage of salary instead of having to calculate on their salary.
Oh, yeah. At the moment, if I work 15 hours, there's no for what 14 hours, no deduction this week. For what 20 hours, a deduction next week.
That's right. And if they do it on a straight percentage, it'll make it easier for employers. There's also another clause in the UIC that if your income is above a certain level and it's higher than most part-timers make, then you do qualify for UIC. And we would simplify it all by just saying...
So therefore you got no encouragement in the main from those who appeared in front of you to include all part-time workers on a percentage payment of UIC?
No, the groups that appeared before us, we had unions, we had women's organizations, employers, and senior citizens groups, plus a lot of individual part-time workers. And what we found was that the unions, the women's groups, and the individual part-time workers all wanted fringe benefits and pension plans and equal pay for part-timers. The employers were totally opposed because of the extra costs. But the interesting thing is the employers all told us during the hearings that if they had to pay them, if it were compulsory, they would have to lay off some of their part-time workers or reduce their hours. We had an independent survey done by a management consulting firm, and it revealed that 76% of employers would not change their hiring practices if they had to pay fringe benefits to part-time workers.
It wouldn't be that big a load in a normal case, would it?
Well, in some cases...
in a part-time worker, what's the kind of financial load an employer would... After all the pension contributions, unless they became vested, which they wouldn't become for a part-time worker, would they?
If they worked there long enough. The proposals for changing the whole pension industry in Canada suggest that they should be vested, within maybe 2 years.
Did you happen to take a ballpark guess at how much extra UIC would have to be paid if we paid it to... And I'm not suggesting this in a question of equity, just in dollars, if you paid UIC to part-time workers?
We didn't calculate how much it would cost if they were unemployed, but what we did look at was how much it would cost employers to pay into these compulsory benefits such as UIC and CPP. And that would be not too expensive for employers. The big cost comes for employers who have a pension plan. And I should point out that our recommendations will not affect small businesses because most of them do not have a pension plan even for their full-time workers.
In other words, it would only affect those who have
a pension plan and fringe benefits, big employers and governments.
Now, I know there's a big fight against mandatory retirement, and I'm inclined to have some sympathy with it myself for obvious reasons. But did you find a similar blockage against any easing of mandatory retirement? But don't answer that until after the break. I'm talking with Joan Wallace. You weren't, oh yes, you were the chairman of the commission. How many commissioners did you have?
I was the only commissioner. It was a sole commissioner, very economical.
A one-person commissioner.
And I had a staff of 5 people.
Now, you say here, the Canadian Human Rights Act, oh, by the way, no, I won't ask you about the BC one, will I?
No.
The Canadian Human Rights Act should be amended to do away with mandatory retirement to enable older workers to work part-time if they choose. That obviously came not from the unions.
No, the unions are not too fussy about doing away with retirement. That came, though, from a national Senior Citizens Association, which presented a brief. And what they suggested is that we should look into the system in Sweden where people have an opportunity to gradually phase out of the workforce instead of having to work full-time until they're 65 and then all of a sudden they just retire cold and have nothing to do. And the way the system works in Sweden is that if you opt into the program, you cut down to 4 days a week for 1 year, and you collect your pay for 4 days, and you're paid part of your pension for the other day. Then the next year you cut down to 3 days a week, and you get your pension for 2 days. And they've found this is very popular in Sweden, and it reduces, because of the reduced income taxes, it reduces their income only to about 80 to 90%.
Well, that's kind of what we've been doing on that UIC Make Work project, where you could work 4 days a week and get 1 day's UIC on the work sharing project.
Yeah, that's similar to the work sharing, except that this is designed strictly for people who are retiring.
Yeah, but can it be a free choice? I mean,
oh, yes.
Is it the free choice of the man?
It's a free choice of the person whether they want to go into this retirement program. And I think about 20% of their workers were going into it.
Because I always take the hypothetical position that a man or a woman who's been tied in for, we'll say, 45 or 50 years into the same job is looking forward intensely to retiring, right or wrong, and suddenly find that there's domestic pressure saying, hey, you don't have to retire. You can work a whole lot longer, and then you won't be hanging around my kitchen all day.
Well, I think, Jack, it depends on what kind of a job you're doing. And one of the reasons the unions oppose it is that people working in coal mines and assembly line jobs, you know, they want to retire as soon as they can. They hate their jobs. But a lot of people in jobs like yours who enjoy their jobs, they want to work after they're 65. One of the other interesting things that we explored is job sharing. And this is entirely different than the work sharing that you just mentioned.
This is what we may be faced with in the future.
Well, we're not saying that it's going to be compulsory. What we're saying is it should be voluntary, that if 2 people want to share one full-time job, for example, your job, if your station wanted to broadcast all year long and you decided you wanted to take the summer off, then you'd have to find someone to share your job, and you work during the winter and they work during the summer. Or if
I thought job sharing was half a day and half a day.
Well, it can be anyway. You can do it half a day. We found teachers, for example, who teach, and this is a married couple, a man and a woman, in Winnipeg. The husband teaches a grade 5 class in the morning, and the wife teaches in the afternoon, and they share looking after their young baby. You can share it on a week-by-week basis, month by month, any way at all.
I know doctors who do that right now. I don't think it's all that good, mind you, because a doctor's a very personal thing, where a doctor will work 3 months and go away for 3 months. His partner will work 3 months
and go away
for 3 months. Although actually, I suppose it's not, I mean, apart from one's own particular sensibilities about seeing the same doctor, if you have to see him, it sounds like a very good idea.
Oh yes, and there's a lot of interest. We found in our survey that most of the job sharers were women. They tended to be women with small children, and they were job sharing because they wanted time to look after their children. And they planned, most of them, to go back into full-time work later on.
The economic facts of life being that many a woman must have, no matter if her husband's unemployed or her husband's got a non-union low-paid job, she must have a part-time job to help pay the mortgage.
Yes, and that was one of the myths that we were able to destroy about part-time workers. A lot
What
of
do you
them,
mean the pin money myth?
the pin money myth. Yeah, what we found.
There was a time when it was pin money myth.
I don't know. I don't know if it was ever pin money or if women said it was pin money so that they wouldn't embarrass their husband because he was expected to be the sole support of the family. Therefore,
good psychological point.
But what we found is that the average part-time worker earns less than $5,000 a year, which isn't very much money, and the part-time worker between the ages of 25 and 44, these are the married women part-time workers, are contributing 25% to their household income. Now, if you're making $5,000 and that accounts for 25% of the household income,
that's $100. So that means that the wife and kids, you might only be making $1,600 gross a month.
Yeah, it means that they're not using it for pin money or for luxuries. They need that money to.
Did much misery express itself through your commission?
Not misery, no. I think what the main thing that came through was the feeling of part-time workers that they were not treated fairly. They were treated as second-class citizens.
I've had a lot of complaints about department stores particularly keeping people just below the UIC level as if by careful design. Did you find any evidence of that?
Yeah, we found a lot of people below the 15 hours a week, so they didn't have to pay UIC. We also found that they were classifying them as regular part-time workers and casual. And the people who were regular, in some cases, were getting fringe benefits, but the casual on-call workers were not getting fringe benefits. And we assumed that
By fringe benefits, you mean payment of medical?
And dental or
whatever.
pension or whatever, depending on the company.
I mean, the only thing that a casual worker is entitled to, or a part-time without fringe benefits, is what? Holiday pay?
Yes, they get UIC if they work 15 hours,
Right.
and they get CPP if they work the number of hours to qualify.
Is that also 15 hours?
No, there's no hours for CPP. It's your minimum amount that you earn per year. And most part-time workers qualify for CPP.
And do they take CPP off the part-time checks?
Yes, they
They might
do.
as well take UIC off on a sliding
Be,
scale
yeah,
too.
the same thing. But what we found was we assumed that people were making this distinction between casual and regular part-timers to avoid paying benefits to the casuals. Then we discovered an interesting Canada Labour Relations Board case where the distinction was being made because the Labour Relations Board said that regular part-time workers could be included in the union, but casual part-time workers could not be included in the union. So we think that some employers are making that distinction to ensure that they can keep a lot of the part-timers out of the union.
That's just not fair.
No, I agree. Oh, Jack, we've agreed at last.
Of course, I agree with most of what you're saying, but I don't want to put it that particular way. Now, what about, I'm not going to involve you in BC politics because you're not involved in it. You're doing a federal study. But we all go crazy now talking about FTEs. You know what an FTE is?
Full-time
equivalent. And we've had thousands of casuals who have been partly disposed of in British Columbia. And these people could have been casuals for 20 years and got nothing.
I know some that came to our commission who'd worked as casual employees for 25, 30 years, had no pension plan. In fact, I even heard of one woman who had paid into the pension plan for a good many years because she thought she qualified. She found when she approached retirement that she hadn't paid enough into it and she was going to get all of that money back.
I don't know if you came across, and there was nothing there.
And no pension.
And no money back.
Well, a little bit. Her own contributions she'll get back.
There used to be unions in this province who would have Class A members who were full members, and then there'd be permit workers who would pay into the pension fund and never ever see it if they lived to be 1,000. It would go straight to headquarters in the States.
Well, in this case, the woman will get her contributions back, but that isn't as good as a pension.
Plus minimum interest.
Yeah, minimum interest and none of the employer's contributions.
Questions to Joan Wallace, the Commissioner in the inquiry into part-time work. After the break. Who is it? Ted. What about his other brothers? Are they there? Mickey's there too, is he? Jimmy's there. Oh, gee. Am I on air? I gotta go. Bye. There is a report this morning that very famous Vancouver man Joe Filipponi has been found dead in his office in the penthouse. We shall have further details later. Joan Wallace is the Commissioner of Inquiry into Part-Time Work. I shall continue taking calls to her, and I shall start here. Go ahead, Joan. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. First of all, my condolences on the death of your friend, Mr. Filipponi. And to get on with the comment of part-time work, I can see in the future that it'll be painfully obvious to all that we're going to have to start sharing our jobs. The microchip, being known as the job killer in Britain, is going to be doing its job here soon, too. But it shouldn't be something terrifying. I think that with the proper government institutions and a proper society attitude, that we can easily go into this new future that we have ahead of us. We're going to have to start retraining people, though, that are doing now basically blue-collar jobs, because their jobs are going to be taken over by robots. you're just going to see a greater industrialization in all of industry, and we're going to have to be ready for it, and we're going to have to look forward to sharing our jobs. It'll give us more leisure time, and hopefully the robotization of industry will make products cheaper so that we can buy the same with less money.
Here's a man of sophistication. What do you say to that?
I think that some of the things he's saying are true. We're predicting that part-time work will go to between 15 and 19% of the workforce. So that is saying that maybe 1 worker in 5 will be working part-time. We're not saying that all of them will be. But I feel that the first step is to pay and treat part-timers fairly. You know, if we want people to job share and to work part-time, they're not going to do it if they lose their pension or they lose their benefits.
In other words, it's an educational step towards the acceptance of work sharing in its broadest form.
Well, I'd make a very strong distinction between work sharing and job sharing. Work sharing is when you're forced into it instead of layoffs. Either you work part-time or you're laid off. Job sharing is strictly voluntary, that 2 people who want to work part-time decide to share 1 full-time job.
That's good, I must remember that. Work sharing is to prevent massive unemployment. Job sharing is a deliberate decision accepted in the institution or on the plan.
Yeah, and it's usually initiated by 2 workers who want to work part-time, and they go to their employer and have to do a real selling job because employers are a little reluctant.
Let's ask this young man here, obviously bright man, why you're so cognizant on this particular problem?
Well, I'm a member of the Government Employees Union right now, and so I can see this happening. And also, I'm a computer scientist right now. I'm taking my training at Control Data Institute, and I'm learning very much about the new future that we have coming for us. And I think that with more and more people going away from these blue-collar sector jobs and coming into the information-related work, that there's just not going to be the amount of hours for the amount of employees that we will have available in the market. And that more so than that, these people are going to be leaving their jobs, they're going to be needing new training. You just have to be ready for it. You have to be able to read it in between the lines in the papers and the magazines that you have available to yourself, and you have to just see it coming.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I've been working part-time for about 15 years. And I'm a little disturbed at the idea of trying to bring in more legislation or something to control it to some degree, because one time when they did it, all it did was cut back on my time. We used to be able to work full-time for about 5 days a week for a period of time, build up a cushion, and then when it got slow, we could use this cushion for other times. Also, we got time off. I mean, sure, you give up certain benefits, but you get other benefits. You take off time when you want to.
In other words, you're a much freer agent if you're only a casual part-time.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, I think a lot of people work part-time by choice.
Let me ask Joan, did you go into the question of casuals on the waterfront?
Not exactly, but we had a survey that covered all sorts of part-time workers. It was done by the labor force and covered, I think, 40,000 workers, so I'm sure they covered some.
Did you find that most people wanted to regularize their part-time, or did they exhibit the attitude of this young man here who's saying more freedom if it's just casual part-time?
Well, a lot of people want the freedom of casual part-time, particularly young people, but we found that as they get older, they might still want to work part-time, but they begin to worry about, I don't have a pension, I don't have any fringe benefits if I get sick. Often part-timers are not given any sick leave. They don't have hospital coverage unless they pay for it themselves. So there are a lot of those benefits that when you get past 30, you begin to worry about those.
Thanks for your call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Yes.
This part-time employment, I agree with 100%, but there's one thing. There must be a way that they can stop this part-time employment and knock out the moonlighters.
May I respond to that?
Yes, please.
There were a lot of people who felt moonlighters were doing, taking too much income. We found that moonlighters, and that, to define it, is someone who has a full-time job and also a part-time job. We found that they're less than 2% of the workforce. So we didn't think that that was a, big enough group that anything should be said about them.
Well, Jack.
Yes?
Listen, I have worked at a full-time job where people come in part-time. And I found the people coming in part-time were union members that could get the day off and come in and work, and they're always fighting for higher wages, but they would come in and work for a minimum wage in this part-time job.
Well, Joan tells me that's a 2% proportion according to the Canada Labour Force study.
I wonder, Jack, if Joan... Hello, Jack?
Yes, yes.
I wonder if Joan would take a look into the new stadium and see how many are moonlighting there on part-time jobs, because all those ushers and that must be part-time jobs.
Well, I think there are certainly people who are holding down a full-time and a part-time job. But there's another group that we found of people who are holding down 2 part-time jobs. And often, both of those jobs will be less than 15 hours a week.
Oh, I've got a thing. I've got a thing that I want to complain about. I think if somebody retires from the federal government or a provincial institution or even a police force after lengthy service and has a good pension, sometimes indexed, not always, that person should be very low on the totem pole for any other jobs in federal, if you're fed, you can work for the province, in any other service. I think when a person has earned a good pension, that they should be in some way restricted from taking jobs from real unemployed.
Well,
Did that come up?
No. In our society, we have always gone on the principle that people are hired for their ability, their qualifications, not for their whether they need the money or not. For example, if you're arguing on the basis of whether they need the money, you should divide up your job and have a different person on here every month. And you know, if you're concerned about income, I think people are hired on their qualifications. And if a retired policeman or retired government worker is needed for some job, whether
Or
it's
a retired Navy commander takes over the command of a BC ferry ship.
if he's hired and can do the job, I think that's the way it is.
Well, I happen to think that there's another qualified deep sea guy or coast ferry guy who hasn't got a federal pension, all things being equal, he should get the job. Maybe that's the way it is.
I agree with you, Jack, 100%.
Maybe that's the way it is, but I don't think it is the way it is, but I'm not about to make a fight about it
Well,
this
I
morning.
think it's nice that way, but, you know, it's nice, but how can you enforce it?
It's always difficult for me to argue from a position of strength about somebody else being denied a job. You know, when I have moonlighted all my life,
That's right.
not in the last few years, but I used to work for radio stations, the CBC, CTC, newspapers. I was the moonlighter doing no moonlighting, you know. Just a disgraceful human being. And I'm not being compulsively retired at 65.
No, I'm sure you won't
I'm
be.
already 83 and I'm still working.
I'll see you here when you're 90, Jack.
Well, I might be here, but you won't. And I didn't mean that. Please, take it back, touch wood.
Okay.
Although there was an item in the paper the other day that really upset me. Oh no, we have an old rule in newspapers, and I don't mean Pete Martin's piece, I mean another stupid little item. Nothing to, but never let people see you're annoyed.
No, okay.
You know, just ignore it with cavalier disdain.
That's right, I always do that.
I wonder what cavalier disdain is. Is that sneering on horseback? Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. My condolences to your friend also. In regards to one of your first callers, I noticed that he was in regards to computer chips and so forth taking over and people needing more training. I find that myself, I'm taking computer training on and off now thoroughly, and more jobs are needing these qualifications. For instance, a large department store is using accounting and auditing and stock and invoice. You find that their whole system of their employees have to be trained in a BCIT, or they have to bring a training program in. Why is that? Why is there such a high demand? I know things are changing, but do they have to change so rapidly?
I don't quite understand his question.
He means hold back technological progress.
Well, I think that's impossible. You know, the world history shows that whenever a new invention comes, people accept it and want to take advantage of
That's
it.
right, the only one that hasn't been used but once or twice is a nuclear bomb.
That's true.
That would solve all our problems.
Let's hope they don't use that one.
One more word with Joan. What is your name again?
Wallace.
Wallace. Of course it is. After the break. Go ahead to Joan Wallace, Commissioner of Part-Time Work.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
We have a curious little problem with the Government Employees Union and the government as to part-time workers getting benefits. You have to put in 240 days within a 15-month period to qualify for benefits.
Right.
in the retail component, what happens is you generally, because of a lack of business through January, February, March, April, get laid off for that 3 or 4 months. So you can work steady for 8 months of the year, virtually every day of the week, get laid off January, February, March, April, and never end up qualifying for benefits.
Except UIC.
You can work for yes, you get UIC benefits, but as far as medical, dental, and all those kind of benefits, you won't make it.
That's just not fair.
Well, that's typical of the type of discrimination we found against part-time workers. We found other workers who work every year for a government board, maybe, for example, the people who process income tax for the federal government. They might work 6 or 8 months a year, but they never qualify for benefits.
That's just not fair at all, never has been fair.
Yes, I've gone to union meetings many times and asked them to reduce that time.
And are they very enthusiastic about it?
They seem to be enthusiastic in meetings, but every time it comes down to the final component bargaining or whatever happens, we see nothing.
Well, we don't know what the provincial government really is going to do with its FTEs. We don't know how many of the FTEs are going to be part-time FTEs to make up one full-time FTE, do we?
Not a clue.
I know at the moment that there have been many vacancies in the liquor branch which are now being transferred from environment and other places into jobs which were making money and which have been empty. It's very tricky indeed. You make a good point, sir. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. To Joan, did Joan ever have any discussions with the people from office assistants, office overload, and that type of company?
Yes, we did. We had a brief from the National Association of Temporary Employment Agents, as I believe it's called, and their view was that their workers are not part-time workers, that they are hired full-time by the employment agency, and then they send them out to various companies on a part-time basis.
Are they paid full-time by the employment agency?
They're only paid for the days they're working, and some of them are given fringe benefits, but most of them are only getting the statutory benefits like UIC and CPP.
That's right. So they're not really full-time workers, and
No,
they're only being paid
no.
for the time they're being sent out to do somebody's stock inventory or fill in for a legal secretary.
What they were trying to say was that they were the same as, for example, a plumbing firm that has a group of plumbers who they send out to various places to fix your plumbing.
Who get paid for the work done.
Yes.
For the doohickey.
I happen to be one of those that Jack was criticizing a few moments ago, a provincial teacher who retired early with consequent reduced pension, and I went to work for office assistants because I wanted to keep working and do something different
Oh,
from
no.
my teaching in my last years.
No, I wasn't criticizing you. I was talking about people with federal pensions, good federal pensions. I'm all for means tests.
No, I
Good
see.
federal pensions who get good provincial jobs.
Oh, I see.
That's what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
No, any man that wants to go out and work, as I shall go out and work, you know, doing whatever is necessary to keep body and soul together. I'm a free man, and you're a free man too.
No, I'm not even having to do that. I'm just thoroughly enjoying myself doing this extra, but I have wondered, it has gone through my mind, am I doing somebody out of a job? But I've also had the situation where I've been called to work in an office because some younger person has said they didn't care for it or couldn't take it or whatever.
Thank you, sir. All is forgiven between us. What's going to happen to your recommendations, if anything, woman?
Well,
Person.
we're hoping they'll be recommended, they'll be implemented. The Labour Minister, the new Labour Minister, Andre Ouellette, was very sympathetic to our views. And it's a case of, going through the usual processes.
What were you before you took this commission on?
I worked for the Retail Merchants Association.
Correct.
As the manager for BC.
And are you going back to that position?
No, I'm not. I'm now, as I tell everyone, after doing a study on part-time work, I now have 4 part-time jobs.
Very good. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, Mr. Webster and Joan, am I correct in saying that if you work less than 15 hours, you can't contribute UIC? Or you don't contribute UIC?
If you're making a higher salary, I've forgotten the exact minimum amount, but if you make a higher salary, you do contribute if you're, above that certain set level.
Oh, I see.
But most
I do contribute.
Yes, most part-time workers are very low-paid workers.
Oh, well, I guess I'm one of the fortunate ones.
And they don't make a high enough salary, and they don't qualify under the 15 hours either.
Oh.
Sorry, ma'am, I didn't mean to cut you off quite so brutally. Kamloops.
Hello?
Yes.
I certainly agree with you about government pension people getting postal service jobs now. I really disagree with this. I think it's terrible. And Mr. McDonald, he has a semi-part-time job. Now, $800 a day for the government to be able to pay that, for us, the taxpayers, to be able to pay that, and yet to ask us, the taxpayers, to be taking lower increases in salaries is...
Not fair to you, and many people think the same way. Joan, recommendations have been presented to the Minister of Labour.
That's right. And they will now, we hope, be investigated by his department, and hopefully will go to Cabinet. I'm hopeful they'll be implemented.
My thanks to Joan Wallace, Commissioner into Part-Time Work. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
I shall be back after the break. It was the tragic end of an era in Vancouver at 7 a.m. today when Joe Filipponi was found dead in his office with a bullet wound. Police are now pursuing a major murder investigation to see what caused this, and there is a belief that a robbery took place. Mr. Filipponi was found, I believe, by one of his brothers. Mr. Filipponi has figured very prominently in many areas in Vancouver's troubled times after the war. I first met him in 1947 when he was running Eagle Time Delivery in the Penthouse, in the days before liquor laws became at all intelligent. And myself and all the other old reporters, the young reporters of the time, Jack Wasserman particularly, spent much time meeting the magnificent characters who assembled at Filipponi's Penthouse. It was the place for showbiz. Every entertainer who came to town was not properly introduced to the city of Vancouver until he had been to the Penthouse late at night. The Penthouse could become a rowdy place. Later on, it became involved in the great hiatus over a certain decision which ended the Penthouse as an area for the people of the night. Mr. Filipponi, I should put on the record, while charged with a number of serious offences, beat every single one of them and was acquitted by the superior courts in this country. Mr. Filipponi's friends will gather, I'm sure, and tell some great stories about him. Wasserman and I used to sit in the corner table there with Joe Filipponi and hear all the latest that was happening in the netherworld of Vancouver. Filipponi I always found to be a very friendly, gracious, delightful man to deal with, and was the source of much information. I don't know what to say about Joe. Joe's been an old friend of mine for many years. I'm very sorry indeed that Joe Filipponi has met this untimely and unnecessary end. Tomorrow we're going to talk to Pat McGeer in High Tech, and we're going to talk about Japanese cars. And that's about it for this morning. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely. What's on tonight? Watch Vancouver's new art gallery on Check at midnight. There's still tenured Dr. McGeer and Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. We had a bit of a soap opera in Vancouver over the weekend, to which I drew attention on my morning program. You know, funny how things happen nowadays. You decide to have a big protest to declare civil disobedience to government. Now, you don't get together in a little dark room and mount an attack on an office. You say, which media shall we phone? Who do we want there? Who? And of course the media jumps as of wrote in case you miss something. Well, I gave my opinion of the sit-in in the Premier's office on my program today, and I just said, If Bennett gets that kind of help from those who think they're helping the BC Federation of Labour, he can dismantle his whole public relations apparatus. Few more incidents like that where these people move in and take command and then dust the place nicely and clean it up before they go, breaking only one toilet seat. They look so stupid it's unbelievable. And they give Bennett all the support he didn't have to ask for. And then I got a bit of a shock today during the course of my program when one of my old buddies and sources, Joe Filipponi, was found dead in his office, murdered. However, we kept going with some fairly routine stuff about, no, I'll do it again. I muffed it. Forgive me for interrupting, but talk about soap operas. Boy, we had one in Vancouver over the weekend, which was a classically staged soap opera, and it even had actors. They are the people who were determined to occupy Premier Bennett's office, and they didn't kind of meet in a great rage and storm the office in civil disobedience. They sat and planned and they thought, which media will we phone? How will we get this coverage? And we'll keep it nice and clean and orderly, and then we can come out and join the other Solidarity program. It looked so stupid. I had to draw attention to it this morning, especially that bit where these dreadfully civil disobedient people who liken themselves to Gandhi wiped up the desk, spat and polished the leather on the chair, you know, and all that kind of jazz. These people keep doing this kind of thing. Bennett can pass his legislation in 5 minutes without any opposition from almost anybody of normal sanity, which is not the way it should be. Then got a bit of a blow this morning when one of my old friends found murdered in his office, 7 o'clock this morning. Ah well, Joe Filipponi, poor Joe. Tomorrow, going to have a deal with Pat McGeer. Used to be a Liberal, I think. Social Credit Cabinet Minister now. He's in favour of all the draconian measures, I'm sure, of the government to which he is now so deeply attached and tenured. 9 a.m. precisely.